Okay, we're going to start with relative paths. Now we have got in here, well, you know what, I want to use somewhere near I got my final website. There it is. Okay, right now, if I want to reference another page within this, they're sitting next to each other so I can work locally. Let's take our HTML and I'm going to put a little p tag in here, call this the home page, and up here in the title I'll call it home. My whole purpose is I want to be able to differentiate. So I'm going to create a second one. In fact, this is the technique I advise you use for creating your other pages. You've created your home page, you have it formatted, you have it working. Create your menu, have the links already named in it, and then what we'll do is we just simply rename it and then change the content. So I have my home page. My next one I'm going to work on is portfolio.html. I'm going to save it as, and I will change this. And here, to signify basically what we're going to do, because we're going to go through, you're going to change the title, and you're going to change your content. Notice I'm not changing my navigation. I've already got that set. So my header, all of that is basically going to stay the same. Anything that changes is really going to be within the main tags and, well, the page title. And I should also change this title. So it's very limited what we're going to do. Part of the reason I concentrate on getting the home page first, because after that the other pages should go pretty quickly, because you have a basic design to work from. So let's take a look at our folder structure. Index.html, portfolio.html, they're sitting right next to each other. I can get to them quickly. If we take a look at my links in here, notice I don't have any HTTP colon, slashes, nothing on it. It's just the name of the file. The reason it works is because they're sitting next to each other. Now, for demonstration, I'm going to create another folder in here. Let's go ahead and we'll call this one images, which is what I generally recommend. Let's put our images into a separate location and make it easy to find them. And I've got, let's see here, I have a portrait, and I'm going to put it into my images folder. So I'm building a directory structure in here. I have my images and my files. If I open this up, I can see within it. Directories are basically trees. You have a trunk, and you have leaves, and you have limbs. The leaves are the individual files, okay? And they'll talk about the root, which is the base of it. You can kind of, and then in that case, they count the trunk like you would a limb. So and it's kind of the way the terminology works on it. But you can think of it as the root or the trunk are basically the same thing. That is your base. This is where everything's going to be. These individual files here are leaves on it. Images is a limb, and the files in it are the leaves on the limb. One way of thinking about it. Another way to think about it. A directory works kind of like a file cabinet. Your root, your main folder here, is the file cabinet itself. So we've got a file cabinet. In it, we have a drawer called images. In the images drawer, I have a file, a picture sitting there called portrait. I can go deeper than this. I can create inside images, well, And we could call it backgrounds. And I'm going to put this backgrounds inside the images folder. So now I have the drawer called images. Inside it, I have a file folder called backgrounds, which we'll go ahead and we'll put an image inside it. And I have my tree background inside it. Are you following the structure here? I'm going deeper on it. So the question comes, how do we reference in our HTML these individual files? So let's go back to our page. And we're going to go ahead, I'll just work in my portfolio page, and we're going to start loading some of these images. Image source equals alt equals. This is the minimum structure for an image tag. Now I've left the pieces blank on it, we're going to fill it in. Note, both the source and the alt are required. It is an error to not have the alt. You must put something in there. Now, there is, if this is an image that is only for display purposes, it has no real functional meaning, the alt is required, but you can leave it blank. If you leave it blank, screen readers will skip it. They will recognize that it's blank and they will move on. So if you're putting in a small image as a spacer, which we don't really need to do anymore, or you're doing it, say, as a background, or you're doing something where the image is purely display, it has nothing of meaning to it, this is valid. Most of your images you're going to use, that is not the case. So we need to put something in it. This one we're going to do our portrait. This is where it can be handy to have Finder sitting where you can see it. So I'm going to shift it over on the side here so I can see what I'm coding at the same time. It helps me keep it straight. I am sitting right here at Portfolio. In order to find my portrait, I have to go into Images. So I'm basically telling the computer a path. I'm giving it directions. It's a map. So I go into Images, and then I can load portrait.jpg. It has to have a picture of old man. Has to have an extension. If I just did portrait and did not put the extension, the name doesn't match. Now here's one catch that you have to be aware of, especially on the Mac. In fact, it's the only operating system I know of that you have to be careful with this. The Macintosh does not require file extensions. Portrait by itself is sufficient on a Mac. So you go into Photoshop, you can create a JPEG file without the JPG or JPEG extension. And it will work on the Mac only. The reason it works is the Mac has got a hidden file. It's a file you can't see that's got the exact same name, and it has what program and the file type it is. So really on the Macintosh there's two files. There's the file which is called the data fork, which has the image. And then it has a resource fork, which is the one that's invisible, that describes the file. All other operating systems that I know of do not keep the resource fork. They are dependent upon hinting in the file. The extension JPG is a hint to the programs on what the file type is. And since we're working across operating systems, we need to make sure we put the extension. Now, the fun part is that Windows and Mac like to hide the extensions. So you invariably have to turn it on and reveal them. I'm not going to show how to do it. It's slightly different under Windows than it is the Mac. You can look at file info and get the full name, but you do need to be able to see the extensions. In fact, when I sit down at a new computer, one of the first things I do is I change the default so I can see file extensions. They're hidden from you, but it's really useful to actually see them. I don't know why they set the other default, because it ends up causing problems, but that is the default. So we have to make sure we have the file extension that matches. We'll also need to make sure that our case matches. Notice images is lowercase I, portraits lowercase p. My recommendation is stick with all lowercase. I make sure it matches. Let's save it. Switch to Firefox. Portfolio. Image loads. Okay, the image is actually too large. This is not an optimized image. But for demonstration purposes, I really don't care for right now. If we were creating this properly, we would optimize the image. So we'd open it up in Photoshop, we'd resize it, and set it correctly for the page. Let's go ahead. We're going to work on our home page. And I'm going to reference the tree. Now, when I did the rename, I no longer have the home page open, so I'm going to go ahead and reopen it so I have my index.html. I want to reference the tree. So again, we're going to put our image tag in. Source equals alt equals. My alt is going to be tree. And we're going to reference it. Now notice that the tree is inside two folders. I have to reference all the folders.